Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked down at the city lights below. The construction site was quiet now. All the other workers had gone home hours ago. He stayed behind to finish welding the steel beams on the 40th floor of the new office building. The overtime pay would help him catch up on rent and maybe buy something nice for his sister's birthday next week. The wind was cold up here, making the metal cranes sway slightly. Jake had been doing construction work for 10 years, ever since he graduated high school. His hands were rough, and his back ached most days, but he liked building things. There was something good about seeing a pile of materials turn into something useful, something that would last long after he was gone. He was packing up his tools when the sky changed. What started as a faint glow became a bright light that hurt his eyes. Jake looked up and saw something impossible. A massive shape blocked out the stars, bigger than any airplane or helicopter he had ever seen. The light got brighter and brighter, until he could not see anything else. His body felt strange, like he was floating. The sounds of the city disappeared. The cold wind stopped. Everything went white and then black dot. When Jake woke up, he was lying on something that felt like metal, but was warm to the touch. The room around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls curved in smooth lines and seemed to glow with a soft blue light. There were no sharp corners anywhere. Everything looked like it had grown instead of being built. He sat up slowly, his head spinning. His work clothes were gone, replaced by a simple gray outfit that felt like silk but looked like it was made from some kind of metal thread. His boots were missing too, and his feet were bare on the warm floor. The room was bigger than his apartment back in Denver. Strange symbols moved across the walls like living text. In the center of the room was what looked like a pool of water, but the water hung in the air without falling. Jake reached out to touch it, and his hand went right through, feeling nothing. A sound made him turn around. Part of the wall was opening, sliding apart without any visible door or hinge. A figure walked through, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. She was clearly not human, but she was beautiful in a way that made his brain struggle to process what he was seeing. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, with skin that had a faint silver shimmer. Her hair was long and white, moving like it was underwater, even though there was no wind. Her eyes were large and completely black, like looking into deep space. She wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight, shifting colors as she moved. When she spoke, Jake heard her voice in his head instead of through his ears. "Do not be afraid, human. I am Princess Leorathiel of the Zephyrian Empire. You have been chosen for a great purpose." Jake scrambled backward until his back hit the wall. What the hell is going on? Where am I? How are you talking in my head? You are aboard our vessel, the Stellar Dominion. We have traveled far to find you. Your species possesses something we desperately need. My species. Lady, I think you got the wrong guy. I'm just a construction worker. I build buildings. I don't know anything about space or aliens or whatever this is. The princess moved closer, and Jake could see sadness in those black eyes. Your people call us aliens, but we are older than your son. We have watched your species grow from primitives to space travelers. You are young, but you have something we have lost. She waved her hand, and the air in front of Jake shimmered. Images appeared like a movie, projected on nothing. He saw cities made of crystal and light, beings like the princess floating through the air, ships that looked like living creatures swimming between the stars. We are the Zephyrians. Once, we numbered in the billions across hundreds of worlds. Our technology allows us to reshape matter with thought alone. We can live for thousands of your years. We can travel between stars as easily as you walk between rooms. The images changed, showing the same beautiful cities but empty now. The crystal buildings were dark and cracking. The princess continued, "But we are dying. Our birth rates have fallen to almost nothing. Our children are born weak and sick. In another 1,000 years, we will be extinct." Jake stared at the images, trying to understand. That's terrible, but what does this have to do with me? I'm not a doctor or a scientist. Geneticists have studied thousands of species across the galaxy. Most are too different from us to be compatible. Others are strong, but lack intelligence. Your species is unique. You have genetic diversity we lost long ago. You adapt to new situations in ways we cannot. Most importantly, your reproductive biology is compatible with ours. The meaning hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. You want me to what? We need you to help save our species, to breed with our females and create hybrid offspring that can survive and prosper. Jake stood up, anger overcoming his fear. You kidnapped me to be some kind of breeding animal. This is insane. Take me home right now. I understand your anger, but please, see what we face. The princess showed him more images. Jake saw alien children lying in beds that looked like healing pods, their small bodies connected to machines. They looked weak and sick, their silver skin pale and dull. These are our youngest generation. Most die before their first year. Those who survive cannot have children of their own. We have tried everything our science knows. Genetic therapy, artificial enhancement, cloning. Nothing works. We are watching our people fade away like a dying star. Jake looked at the sick children and felt his anger mixing with something else. Pity, maybe, or sadness. Even if I wanted to help, and I'm not saying I do, how do you know this would work? We have tested your genetic material. The compatibility is remarkable. More than that, your people have traits we need. You feel emotions deeply while we have become cold and logical. You adapt and improvise while we follow rigid patterns. You create new solutions while we can only perfect old ones. Genetic material. When did you test my genetic material? We have been observing your species for some time. We collected samples from many humans before selecting the best candidates. You were chosen because your genetic profile shows the greatest potential for successful hybridization. Jake felt sick. You've been watching us, taking samples. For how long? Several of your decades. We needed to be certain before we acted. This program is our last hope. The princess moved to what looked like a window, though Jake could not see. How the crystal wall could be transparent. Outside was the black of space, filled with more stars than he had ever imagined possible. I know this is overwhelming, but you are not a prisoner here. You are our guest, our partner in survival. If you help us, we will share our technology with your people. Your species will join the galactic community centuries ahead of your natural development. Jake joined her at the window, staring out at the impossible view. Earth was nowhere to be seen. He was farther from home than any human had ever been. What if I say no? Then we will return you to your world with no memory of this encounter. But our species will continue to die, and your people will remain alone in the universe for many more centuries. Jake was quiet for a long time, looking at the stars and thinking about the sick alien children. Finally, he asked, if I do this, if I help you, what happens to me? Do I ever get to go home? That choice would be yours to make. But Jake Martinez, I believe you will find that home is not always a place. Sometimes it is a purpose. Jake did not answer right away. He was a simple man who had lived a simple life. Now he was being asked to help save an entire species of aliens. It was too big, too strange, too impossible. But those images of the dying children stayed in his mind, and he found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. The princess waited patiently, while Jake tried to decide what to do with the rest of his life. 3 days had passed since Jake agreed to help the Zephyrians, and he was starting to understand just how different these aliens really were. The ship was like a living thing, with corridors that seemed to know where he wanted to go, and rooms that changed temperature based on his comfort. Food appeared whenever he was hungry, though it tasted like nothing he had ever eaten before. Princess Lirathiel had assigned him quarters that were bigger than most houses back on Earth. The walls could show any view he wanted, from Earth's beaches to alien sunsets he could never have imagined. But the luxury did not make him feel less homesick or less nervous about what he had agreed to do. On the fourth day, the princess came to see him with another Zephyrian. This one was male, taller even than Lirathiel, with the same silver skin, but darker robes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Jake, this is Chief Geneticist Vorden. He will explain the process we will use. Verdun studied Jake like he was looking at a lab specimen. When he spoke, his mental voice was colder than the princess's, more clinical. The human shows acceptable genetic markers. His DNA contains the diversity patterns we require. However, the psychological preparation will be crucial. Psychological preparation? Jake asked. The breeding process requires mental as well as physical compatibility. Zephyrian reproduction involves a neural bond between partners that allows genetic material to adapt during conception. Without proper mental preparation, the process will fail. Jake felt his stomach tighten. Nobody mentioned anything about neural bonds. Princess Lirathiel moved closer. It is not painful, Jake, but it does require trust and emotional openness. This is where your human nature may actually be an advantage. You feel emotions more deeply than we do. Verdun activated a device that projected holographic images in the air. We have selected the first female for the program. Her name is Sorare. She is young, intelligent, and has volunteered for this experiment. The hologram showed a Zephyrian female who looked younger than the princess. Her silver hair was shorter, and her black eyes seemed curious rather than sad. She wore the robes of a scientist, and Jake could see symbols on her clothing that probably indicated her rank or specialty. She has studied your species extensively, Vorden continued. She understands human biology and psychology better than any other Zephyrian. However, she has never interacted with a human directly. What's her attitude about all this? Jake asked the princess, and Verdun exchanged a look that Jake was learning to recognize as their version of uncomfortable silence. She views this as a scientific experiment, the princess finally said. She is curious about human reproductive biology, but finds your emotional responses somewhat primitive. Great. So she thinks I'm a caveman. You must understand, Jake, that we Zephyrians have spent millennia suppressing our emotions in favor of logic and control. To us, your emotional intensity seems chaotic and unpredictable. Verdun waved his hand and the hologram changed to show detailed charts and graphs. The compatibility testing shows a 93% chance of successful conception. The offspring will possess enhanced genetic stability while retaining beneficial traits from both species. Jake studied the charts, though most of the symbols meant nothing to him. And what happens to the kid? I mean, what kind of life would a half-human, half-alien child have? That depends largely on the success of this program, the princess said. If the hybrid children prove viable, they will be raised with the best of both cultures. They will have access to our technology and knowledge, but also to human creativity and emotional depth. And if the program fails, Verdun's expression did not change, but Jake sensed disappointment in the alien's mental voice. Then our species continues its decline toward extinction, and your offspring would be among the last Zephyrian hybrid children ever born. The weight of that responsibility settled on Jake's shoulders like a heavy coat. He was not just being asked to father a child, but potentially to help save an entire civilization. When do I meet her? Sorellen, I mean. Today, if you are ready, the princess said. But first, you should understand what the neural bonding process involves. Verdun activated another device, and Jake felt a strange tingling in his head. Suddenly, he could sense the emotions of both aliens in the room. The princess's sadness and hope were like a gentle current, while Verdun's clinical detachment felt like cold metal. This is a basic neural link, Verdun explained. During the breeding process, the connection will be much deeper. You will experience your partner's thoughts and feelings as if they were your own. For a human, this may be overwhelming. Jake tried to process the sensation of feeling alien emotions. It was like hearing music in a language he did not understand. Beautiful, but strange. How do I control it? You do not control it, the princess said. You experience it. This is why emotional openness is so important. If you try to resist the connection, it will fail. They spent the next several hours teaching Jake meditation techniques that would help him handle the neural bonding. It was harder than any physical labor he had ever done. Zephyrian meditation required emptying his mind of all thoughts and emotions, something that went against every human instinct he had. Stop trying so hard, the princess said after his latest failed attempt. You're human? Nature wants to fight and struggle. Instead, try to accept what you feel. Jake tried again, this time focusing on accepting rather than controlling. Slowly, he began to sense the subtle mental currents around him. He could feel the ship's artificial intelligence, a vast and complex presence that monitored everything. He could sense other Zephyrians moving through distant corridors, their minds like distant stars. When he finally met Sir Alan, it was in a laboratory that looked more like a garden. Plants from dozens of worlds grew in impossible combinations, their colors and shapes defying everything Jake knew about biology. The air smelled like rain and flowers and something else he could not identify. Sir Alan was examining a plant that seemed to be made of living crystal when Jake entered. She looked up at him with those large black eyes, and he felt her mind touch his through the neural link. Her first emotion was curiosity, sharp and analytical. Then came surprise at the intensity of his emotional responses. Finally, there was something that might have been disgust at what she perceived as his primitive thought patterns. So you are the human? She said, her mental voice precise and cold. You are smaller than I expected. Nice to meet you too, Jake replied, trying to keep his irritation under control. Sir Alan circled him like a scientist studying a new specimen. Your emotional responses are very chaotic. How do you function with such mental noise? We call them feelings, and they help us make decisions and connect with other people. Inefficient, she said. Emotions cloud judgment and lead to irrational choices. Jake felt his temper rising, but then he remembered the meditation training. Instead of getting angry, he tried to understand her perspective. Through the neural link, he sensed that her coldness was not cruelty, but genuine confusion. She literally could not understand how emotions could be helpful. Maybe, he said, but emotions also drive us to protect people we care about, to create beautiful things, and to keep trying even when logic says we should give up. Sir Alan paused in her examination. Interesting. You suggest that irrationality can produce beneficial outcomes. I'm suggesting that there's more than one kind of intelligence. For the first time, Jake sensed something like interest from her. She moved closer, and he could smell something like ozone and starlight. The breeding process will require us to share consciousness completely, she said. I will experience your chaotic emotions, and you will experience my logical processes. Are you prepared for that level of intimacy with an alien? Jake looked into those black eyes and tried to imagine what it would be like to truly know an alien mind. It was terrifying and fascinating at the same time. I guess we'll find out together, he said. Sir Alan nodded slowly. Yes. We will discover if human irrationality and Zephyrian logic can create something greater than either alone. As Jake prepared for the most intimate and important experience of his life, he wondered if he was ready to help create a new kind of being, one that might bridge the gap between two very different species. The birth chamber glowed with soft golden light as Jake held his daughter for the first time. Zara was beautiful in a way that took his breath away, with silver-tinted skin that sparkled like starlight and eyes that shifted between human brown and Zephyrian black depending on her mood. Her hair was dark like his, but moved with the same underwater quality as her mother's. Sir Alan lay exhausted on the biobed, but Jake could feel her amazement through their still active neural link. The bonding process had changed them both. Over the past months, she had learned to appreciate human emotions, while he had gained some of her logical clarity. They were no longer the same beings who had met in the Crystal Garden. "She is remarkable," Sir Velen whispered, her mental voice warm with an emotion that would have been impossible for her before their joining. "I can sense her consciousness. Already, it is unlike anything we have recorded." Verdon stood nearby with his scanning devices, but his usual clinical detachment was replaced by something approaching. "The genetic integration is perfect. Better than perfect. The hybrid traits have not just combined but enhanced each other." Baby Zara opened her eyes and looked directly at Jake. In that moment, he felt something impossible happen. The infant's mind touched his, not through technology, but through some natural ability. He sensed her emotions, her curiosity about this strange new world, and something else that made him gasp. "She can read minds," he said. "Not just the neural link stuff. She's actually reading my thoughts." Princess Leorathiel, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped forward quickly. "That should not be possible. Zephyrian children do not develop psychic abilities until adolescence." Sorella sat up despite her exhaustion. "She has human, emotional depth, combined with Zephyrian psychic potential. The combination may have accelerated her development." As if responding to their discussion, Zara made a small sound that was part human baby cry, and part something else entirely. The sound seemed to carry meaning, and everyone in the room felt a wave of contentment and love wash over them. "She is projecting emotions," Vorden said, his voice filled with wonder. "She is sharing her feelings with all of us through natural psychic ability." Jake looked down at his daughter and felt his world shift. This tiny being was not just half human, she was something entirely new. Something that might change both species forever. Over the following weeks, Zara's abilities continued to develop at an impossible rate. She could sense the emotions of everyone around her and respond accordingly. When Jake was sad, she would project comfort. When Soralin was working on a difficult problem, the baby would somehow share a sense of clarity that helped her think. But their happiness was interrupted when Lord Commander Vexfell arrived on the ship with a squadron of Zephyrian military vessels. Jake had never met the commander before, but he knew from ship gossip that Vexfell led the faction of Zephyrians, who opposed the breeding program. The commander was older than most Zephyrians Jake had encountered, with scars on his silver skin that spoke of ancient battles. His mental presence felt like cold steel, rigid and uncompromising. "Princess, this abomination must end," Dexville declared as he stood in the ship's council chamber. "You are contaminating our pure genetic heritage with primitive alien material." Jake stood beside Sir Alin, holding Zara protectively. The baby seemed to sense the hostility in the room and began projecting waves of distress that made everyone uncomfortable. "The program is succeeding beyond our greatest hopes," Princess Leorathio replied. "The hybrid children show capabilities that neither species possesses alone. Capabilities that threaten our very nature," Vexful shot back. "These hybrids will not be Zephyrian. They will be something else entirely, something that could replace us." "Maybe that's the point," Jake said, his anger overriding his nervousness. "Maybe your species needs to change to survive." Vexfell's attention turned to Jake with the intensity of a laser. "The human speaks of change as if it were beneficial. We have achieved perfection through millennia of careful development. We will not throw away our heritage for the sake of survival." "What good is perfection if it leads to extinction?" Sorlin asked, her voice carrying new strength. The months with Jake had changed her, made her more willing to challenge authority. "Better to die as pure Zephyrians than to live as mongrel hybrids," Vexvel declared. Baby Zara began crying, but her cries carried such intense emotional weight that several Zephyrians in the room staggered. Her distress was magnified by her psychic abilities, creating a feedback loop of fear and anger. Jake tried to comfort her, But Zara's abilities were too strong for him to handle alone. It was Soralin who found the solution, using her scientific training to create a mental shield that contained the baby's projections. You see, Vexville said, the hybrid is dangerous, even as an infant. What will happen when she reaches maturity? Princess, Lyrathiel looked at the baby with worry in her black eyes. We will teach her to control her abilities, just as we teach our own children. Our children do not develop such power until they are mature enough to handle it. This creature could destroy minds by accident. Jake felt fear creeping into his heart. Was his daughter really dangerous? Could her abilities hurt people without her meaning to? But then he looked into Zara's eyes and saw not a monster, but a confused baby who needed love and guidance. Through their bond, he sensed her nature. She was not evil or destructive. She was simply more powerful than anyone had expected. She needs training, Jake said firmly. But she also needs acceptance. If you treat her like a monster, she might become one. Dexville laughed, a sound like breaking glass. The primitive speaks of acceptance while his offspring threatens the mental stability of everyone around her. I've made my decision, Princess Lyrathiel announced. The program will continue. We will work to understand and guide the hybrid children's development. Then you force my hand, Vexville said. I cannot allow this contamination to spread. The commander made a gesture, and Jake felt something change in the ship's atmosphere. Warning lights began flashing, and the artificial intelligence's voice echoed through the corridors, announcing a security alert. You would commit treason against your own princess? Sorelin asked in shock. I would save my species from its own foolish desperation, Vexville replied. Jake realized they were in real danger. Vexville's forces had somehow taken control of ship systems. But before he could act, something unexpected happened. Zara stopped crying and instead began projecting something new. Not distress or fear, but a complex emotion that combined love, hope, and determination. The feeling was so pure and powerful that it cut through the tension in the room like sunlight through clouds. For a moment, even Vexville seemed affected by the baby's projection. His rigid mental defenses wavered, and Jake caught a glimpse of the fear and sadness beneath the commander's cold exterior. She is not a weapon, Jake said softly. She is hope. Can't you feel it? Vexville shook his head as if clearing his thoughts. I feel manipulation. The hybrid is using her abilities to influence our emotions. Or maybe she's just sharing what she feels, Jake replied. Love for her family and hope for the future. Before Vexville could respond, new alarms began sounding. The ship's scanners had detected incoming vessels, but these were not they were Maltharian warships, their distinctive organic designs unmistakable on the view screen. The Malthorians have found us, Vorden announced. Long-range sensors indicate a full battle fleet. Princess Lyrathiel turned to Vexville. Will you continue this internal conflict while our enemies approach, or will you help defend what we have built? Jake looked down at his daughter, who had fallen asleep in his arms, still projecting gentle waves of comfort. Whatever happened next, he would protect her and the future she represented. But he could not help wondering if the Malthorians had come for the same reason as Dexville, to stop the hybrid program before it could change the balance of power in the galaxy. The stars outside seemed to grow dimmer as the enemy fleet approached, and Jake realized that his daughter's existence had made him a target in an interstellar conflict he barely understood. But as he felt Zara's peaceful dreams through their bond, he knew that some things were worth fighting for, even against impossible odds. 6 months had passed since the Maltharian attack, and the Stellar Dominion now carried 47 humans who had volunteered for the breeding program. Jake had become their unofficial leader, helping them adjust to life among the stars, while learning to be a father to Zara, who was developing at an incredible rate. His daughter was now walking and had begun speaking in a mixture of English and Zephyrian that she seemed to invent as she went along. More importantly, she had learned to control her psychic projections. turning what had once been overwhelming emotional broadcasts into gentle touches of empathy that helped bridge the gap between species. Jake stood in the training center watching Maria Santos teach combat techniques to a group of human volunteers. Maria had been a Marine sergeant before her abduction, and her no-nonsense attitude had made her invaluable in preparing the humans for the realities of interstellar conflict. The key is adaptation, Maria was saying to her students. These aliens have fancy technology, but they think in patterns that are thousands of years old. We think fast and dirty. That's our advantage. Nearby, Dr. Kevin Walsh worked with Zephyrian scientists to understand the genetic compatibility between the species. Kevin had been a geneticist at the Centers for Disease Control before finding himself on an alien ship, and his expertise had proven crucial in improving the breeding program's success rate. The hybrid children are not just surviving, Kevin explained to a group of mixed human and Zephyrian researchers. They're thriving in ways that neither parent species can match. Their immune systems are more robust than ours. Their neural development is accelerated compared to Zephyrians, and their ability to interface with both biological and technological systems is unprecedented. Jake smiled as he watched the collaboration between the species. What had started as a desperate attempt to save the Zephyrians had become something much larger. The humans were not just contributing genetic material, they were bringing new ways of thinking and problem-solving that were revolutionizing Zephyrian society. Sarah Lynn approached with a datapad in her hands, her expression excited. Jake, you need to see this. The latest scans of the hybrid children show something remarkable. She activated the device, showing brain scans of the 43 hybrid children now aboard the ship. Look at the neural activity patterns. They are not just using human and Zephyrian brain structures separately. They have developed entirely new neural pathways that allow them to process information in ways neither species can achieve. What does that mean in practical terms? Jake asked. Watch this, Sarah Lynn said, leading him to where their daughter was playing with a Zephyrian toy that projected complex mathematical equations as light patterns. Zara looked at the equations for a moment, then began manipulating them with her hands, solving problems that would challenge adult Zephyrian mathematicians. But she was not just solving them logically. Jake could sense through their bond that she was feeling the mathematical relationships, experiencing them as emotions and colors. She's not just calculating, he realized. She's intuiting the answers. Exactly. The hybrid children combined Zephyrian analytical ability with human intuition and pattern recognition. They can solve problems that would stump our greatest minds, because they approach them from multiple angles simultaneously. This breakthrough led to the hybrid children being integrated into the ship's operations in ways no one had anticipated. Young as they were, they could interface with the ship's systems more effectively than adult Zephyrians, because they could feel what the technology needed rather than just programming it logically. Jake found himself in the unusual position of being an advisor to Princess Lirathiel on matters of human psychology and military strategy. The Maltharian threat was still real, and their ships continued to probe Zephyrian space, looking for the breeding program. Your people think differently about conflict, the princess said during one of their strategy sessions. You consider options. That would never occur to us. That's because we're used to being outgunned, Jake replied. Humans have spent most of our history fighting each other with limited resources. We've learned to be creative. Show me, she said. Jake called up a holographic display of the local star system. The Malthorians expect you to run or fight conventionally. What if we do neither? He began manipulating the display, showing how they could use the system's asteroid belt as cover while the hybrid children interfaced with captured Maltharian technology to turn their own weapons against them. You suggest deception and misdirection, the princess said thoughtfully. I suggest survival. By any means necessary, Jake corrected. Sometimes the best way to win a fight is to change the rules. The plan they developed was unlike anything in Zephyrian military doctrine. Instead of fleeing or engaging in direct combat, they would set a trap that relied on human cunning and hybrid abilities. When the Maltharian fleet finally arrived in force, they found what appeared to be a damaged Zephyrian vessel drifting near, a nebula. The ship's distress signals indicated critical system failures and a desperate crew, ready to surrender. What the Malthorians did not know was that the ship was crewed entirely by humans and hybrids, with Jake in command. Maria had trained the human crew in combat tactics, while the hybrid children had learned to interface with both Zephyrian and captured Maltharian technology. Remember, Jake told his crew as the enemy ships approached, "We're not trying to destroy their entire fleet. We just need to capture their command ship and force a withdrawal." The Malthorians took the bait, sending boarding parties to capture what they thought was a crippled vessel. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that fought with tactics they had never encountered. The humans used guerrilla warfare techniques, striking from unexpected directions and disappearing into the ship's maintenance tunnels. The hybrid children, led by Zara, despite her young age, interfaced with the enemy's technology and turned their own weapons against them. But the real surprise came when the hybrid children did something no one had expected. They established a psychic link with the Maltharian boarders. Not to attack their minds, but to share emotions and memories. Through this link, the Malthorians experienced human determination, Zephyrian wisdom, and something new that the hybrids brought to both species. They felt what it was like to hope for the future, to love family, to sacrifice for something greater than oneself. The effect was devastating to the Maltharian attack. Their species was as emotionally suppressed as the Zephyrians had been, but they had no defense against the pure emotional honesty that the hybrid children projected. One by one, the Maltharian soldiers stopped fighting, not because they were defeated, but because they were overwhelmed by emotions they had forgotten they could feel. Jake found himself face to face with the Maltharian commander, a being with chitinous armor and multiple arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. But instead of attacking, the commander stood frozen as Zara toddled up to him and placed her small hand on his armored leg. Through the psychic link his daughter had established, Jake felt the commander's shock and confusion. The alien had expected to find weapons or advanced technology worth stealing. Instead, he found something that his species had been missing for millennia: the ability to feel hope and love. "What have you done to me?" the commander asked, his voice filled with wonder rather than anger. "We shared ourselves with you," Jake replied. "That's what families do." The Maltharian looked down at Zara, who was projecting waves of innocent affection. "This small being has more power than our greatest weapons." "The power to connect instead of destroy," Jake agreed. "The power to build instead of tear down." When the Maltharian fleet withdrew, they took with them more than just the memory of their defeat. They carried the seeds of change that the hybrid children had planted in their minds, emotions and possibilities that would reshape their society just as the humans had reshaped the Zephyr INS. As Jake watched the enemy ships disappear into hyperspace, he realized that his daughter and the other hybrid children were not just the future of two species. They were the beginning of something that could transform the entire galaxy, one connection at a time. 2 years had passed since the Maltharian encounter, and Jake stood on the observation deck of the Stellar Dominion, watching his daughter play with her younger siblings. The breeding program had expanded beyond anyone's dreams, with over 200 hybrid children now calling the ship home. Zara, now 4 years old, but with the intelligence of a teenager, was teaching the younger ones how to control their psychic abilities. The galaxy had taken notice of what was happening aboard the Zephyrian vessel. Reports of the hybrid children's abilities had spread through every spacefaring civilization, creating both wonder and fear. The Galactic Council, a governing body of the oldest races in the galaxy, had finally decided to investigate. "They will arrive today," Princess Lyrithiel informed Jake as she joined him at the viewing window. Representatives from 12 different species, including the Eternal Dominion and the Crystalline Collective. Jake nodded, watching Zara help a toddler named Alex Santos project his emotions more gently. Alex was Maria's son, and like all the hybrid children, he was developing abilities that amazed even the Zephyrian scientists. "Are you nervous?" Sir Ellen asked, as she approached with Dr. Kevin Walsh and several other human parents. "Terrified," Jake admitted. "These council members could decide that we're a threat to galactic stability. They could order the program shut down, or worse. They could also decide that we represent the future," Kevin said optimistically. "The genetic analysis data is undeniable. The hybrid children are healthier, more adaptably and more psychically gifted than either parent species." Maria Santos joined them, carrying her newborn daughter, Isabella. "The question is whether the council sees us as an opportunity or a threat. From what I've read about galactic politics, they don't like changes that upset the balance of power." The massive council ship arrived on schedule, a vessel that dwarfed even the stellar Dominion. It was shaped like a crystalline flower, with sections representing each member species. As it docked with their ship, Jake felt a mixture of pride and anxiety about what was to come. The council chamber had been prepared according to galactic protocols, with environmental controls adjusted for each species represented. Jake found himself sitting between Suralin and Zara, facing beings unlike anything he had ever imagined. There was Ambassador Kethfer of the Eternal Dominion, an energy being that appeared as shifting patterns of light. Beside him sat Resonance Prime of the Crystalline Collective, a creature made of living gemstone that communicated through harmonic vibrations. Representatives from 10 other species completed the council, each more alien than the last. The council leader, an ancient being called the First Speaker, addressed them through universal translators. "We have come to evaluate the claims made about your hybrid breeding program. We understand that you have created beings with unprecedented psychic abilities." Princess Lyrathiel stood to address the council. "Honored representatives, what began as a desperate attempt to save my species has become something much greater. The human Zephyrian hybrids represent a new form of life that combines the best traits of both species." "And what of the risks?" asked Ambassador Kethfer. "We have reports of psychic projections powerful enough to influence the minds of entire crews. Such abilities could be weaponized." Before anyone could answer, Zara stood up from her chair. At 4 years old, she barely reached Jake's waist, but her presence filled the room with calm authority. "May I speak?" she asked politely. The council members exchanged glances, clearly surprised that a child had addressed them. The first speaker nodded slowly. "You're afraid of us," Zara said simply. "I can feel it. You think we might hurt you, or change things in ways you don't like." "Child, your abilities are indeed concerning," the first speaker replied. Zara nodded seriously. "Papa taught me that fear makes people do bad things sometimes, but he also taught me that understanding makes fear go away." She looked around the room at each council member in turn. "Would you like to understand what we really are?" Before anyone could object, Zara began projecting not just emotions, but memories and experiences. The council members suddenly found themselves seeing through the eyes of the hybrid children, feeling what it was like to grow up with the combined heritage of 2 species. They experienced the joy of discovery as young minds learned to interface with technology through intuition rather than programming. They felt the deep empathy that allowed the hybrids to understand and connect with beings completely different from themselves. Most importantly, they sensed the overwhelming desire to help and heal. That seemed to be fundamental to the hybrid nature. Ambassador Kethfer, despite being an energy bane, somehow conveyed surprise. The child is not projecting aggression or dominance. She is sharing compassion. "Because that's what we are," Zara said simply. "We're not weapons. We're bridges." Jake felt tears in his eyes as his daughter continued speaking with wisdom far beyond her years. Every species in the galaxy has something beautiful and something broken, Zara continued. Humans feel deeply but sometimes can't see the big picture. Zephyrians think clearly but forgot how to feel. Melthorians are strong but forgot how to love. We don't want to replace anyone. We want to help everyone remember what they've lost. The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Finally, Resonance Prime spoke through harmonic vibrations that the translators rendered as music. The child speaks of unity rather than conquest. This is unprecedented in our experience. The first speaker leaned forward. Child, what do you see as the future for your people? Zara thought for a moment, her young face serious. I see a galaxy where everyone can talk to everyone else, where the lonely species find friends, and where the scared species find peace. I see families that include lots of different kinds of people, all taking care of each other. Another council member, a reptilian being called Star, spoke for the first time. Your vision would require unprecedented cooperation between species that have been enemies for millennia. Yes, Zara agreed cheerfully. It'll be hard work. But humans are good at hard work, and Zephyrians are good at long-term planning. Together, we can figure it out. Jake watched in amazement as his 4-year-old daughter negotiated with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Her combination of human emotional intelligence and Zephyrian logical thinking allowed her to present complex ideas in ways that each species could understand. What guarantees can you offer that these hybrid abilities will not be misused? Ambassador Kethfer asked. This time it was Jake who stood to answer. None, he said honestly. Any power can be misused. But I can tell you this. We've raised these children to value connection over control, understanding over dominance. They're not perfect, but they're trying to be better than their parents. He looked around the room at the alien representatives. You're worried about what the hybrids might do to you, but maybe you should consider what they might do for you. Every species here has problems that seem impossible to solve alone. Maybe it's time to try solving them together. The council deliberated for 3 days, while the hybrid children played in the ship's gardens, their laughter echoing through corridors that had once known only the cold efficiency of pure Zephyrian logic. When the council reconvened, the first speaker announced their decision. The Galactic Council recognizes the human Zephyrian hybrid program as a legitimate attempt at peaceful species development. Furthermore, we invite volunteers from other species to participate in expanded hybrid programs, under careful monitoring, and with full consent protocols. Jake felt his knees go weak with relief. Not only were they safe, but the program would expand across the galaxy. However, the first speaker continued. We require that Jake Martinez serve as the first human ambassador to the Galactic Council, to ensure that human perspectives are represented in future interspecies relations. Jake looked at Sep, who nodded encouragingly. He looked at his daughter, who was beaming with pride. Finally, he looked out at the stars through the chamber's viewing port. I accept, he said, but I have one condition. The hybrid children must be involved in all decisions that affect their future. They're not just the product of this program, they're its purpose. 6 months later, Jake stood in the council chambers aboard the Galactic Capital Station, watching Zara and 12 other hybrid children address representatives from over 50 species. They spoke of cooperation, understanding, and the dream of a galaxy where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Through the viewing port, he could see ships from dozens of worlds docked at the station. Humans worked alongside Malthorians, and species he was still learning to identify. The first generation of hybrid children was growing up in a galaxy that was learning to value connection over conquest. Jake thought about his old life on Earth, building skyscrapers, and dreaming small dreams. Now he was helping to build something much larger. A future where humanity's greatest gift was not their technology or their weapons, but their ability to make friends with anyone, no matter how different they might be. His daughter looked back at him from the speaker's podium and smiled. her expression radiating the hope and love that had become the hallmark of her generation. Jake smiled back, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, the galaxy was in good hands. The stars had never looked brighter.